time for another book, time for another book review. How the Bible Actually Works by Peter Enns. Uh, this is thanks to some AI research through this guy up. Otherwise, I'd have never heard of him. Maybe the name, but not his content. Really good stuff, actually. He was forgive the camera work. He was a theologian at Westminster Theological Seminary, I think, and he got the boot because it was they just thought, okay, your exegesis is no longer in line with our creedal statements and our mission statements. So there's the door. That took about 2 years for them to clean him off, to get rid. Um, he wasn't just going to take that sitting down. Fair play to him. Um, Now he works in various places and writes a lot of books. The style is very conversational, which, to be honest, I found a wee bit irksome, but the content is very good. I think he's a better public speaker than he is a writer, or maybe that's just the audience he was targeting, was the kind of conversational, beginner level, non-specialist audience. Well, let's face it, that's the majority of people in the world of theology. People too busy out earning a living, being engineers, doctors, teachers, whatever. How the Bible actually works, then let's get into it. He, forgive me. His central thesis is that the Bible is not one solid block as you go down, through it. Within it, we see changes coming to the law from, for example, within the Torah itself, the first 5 books, which are the foundation of the whole Tanakh, the whole Old Testament, and therefore of the Bible. Within the Torah itself, these first 5 books, we see a shift coming from the earlier books to Deuteronomy, which is written later. He shows, how the scholars are showing that this is indeed later. It's not principally written by Moses. It's written later on in very different circumstances, and one sees a softening of some of the rules straight off, without even dipping back into the book. The examples he gives are things like slavery laws, which, in its day, slavery was an accepted form of doing life. Capture people, enslave them, so you don't have to kill them. Maybe one day they get their freedom. He shows that in the early doors in the Torah, it was very much right after a certain period of time, is it 7 years, whatever, the males can be freed, but not the females. There's a later on then in Deuteronomy, there's a softening, and it includes the females. There are lots of other examples within the book showing that the laws are not static. There's a revisioning, there's a redoing of these laws over time. Similarly, with comparing Leviticus and Deuteronomy and such likes, and then we see within within other texts, Chronicles, in comparison to First and Second Kings and things like this, that there's a reapplication and a redoing. He shows where some of the things that we would necessarily take, well, that's history, like Jonah and the whale, or the book of Job, for example. These are obvious. There's an obvious element of allegory in these tales. The central thesis of the author, and I'm sorry I'm not really dipping majorly into it, is that the Bible is principally a wisdom text. It's principally not a rule book. It's not there to, okay, what do we do with adultery? What do we do with homosexuality? What do we do with racism or any other, issue? The answer's on page 76. One cannot really use the Bible like that, he shows. He gives the classic example in the book of Proverbs where, answer the fool according to his folly. And then immediately after, there's the counsel, don't answer the fool according to his folly, lest you become like him. Well, which one is it? And this obviously shows that, the wisdom of the Bible is not there to kind of say, this is what you do in every circumstance. It's not like what we used to call in seminary ca- casuist, casuistria, or like casuistics, I think you might call it in English, where this was how you trained priests in the old days. If the penitent says this, then it's give them this penance. If they have done this, but there's this and this mitigating factor, and of course, all you do is proliferate the books, proliferate the confusion, proliferate the complexity of what should be a far more simpler operation, which is to utilize the God given reason, God given experience, God given wisdom. The Jacob and Esau, the great story of Jacob wrestling with the angel of God all night, struggling for his blessing. Tell me your name. And he's given this blessing, and he's given a new name, Israel, thou who hast wrestled with God and has prevailed. And that's what the Bible is for, to wrestle with God, just as Job wrestles with God and is complimented for it. That's what we have to do. We don't apply the Bible just as a rule book so we can find our particular tradition and, make it a rule book for all time. Okay, I found the proof texts for Catholicism in this book, Matthew 16, 16 to 18, and other such proof texts. That's it. Catholicism for all time, or Eastern Orthodoxy. I found the proof texts for hesychasm. I found the proof text for the Eucharist. I found the proof text for the priest. That's it for all time, Eastern Orthodoxy. That's not how the Bible already points us beyond that by showing us multi layers of evolution over time, as the law evolves, as the history and the revisiting of the history evolves, the interpretation of that history evolves down through time. I'm sorry I haven't made a very good job today at really dipping into this, but it's well worth at least checking out Peter Enns on YouTube. He's got some very interesting things to say. This classic revisionism we see with Jesus. Jesus comes along and he's a revisionist. Jesus is one of Jesus's key pastimes is to wrestle with the Torah, to wrestle with the Tanakh, to wrestle with Jewish tradition and reinterpret it. Why this constant reinterpretation? Because the situations change, the historical circumstances change, and therefore the interpretation, which is adequate, will change too. Early doors of the Jewish world, Israel, probably very much a need to consolidate Israel, very much an emphasis on keeping the law. Later on, it's okay, well, there's more of an emphasis on love, on salvation, more of an emphasis on what happens after we die, the resurrection. He deals with that in the book. Where does this notion of resurrection come in? And he says it's the Greek influence. We can see the Septuagint is another one. The Septuagint is a reinterpretation of the Hebrew texts, the Masoretic texts, as they came to be called, over time. Why? Because the Hebrews were surrounded by and invaded by the Greeks, and they were showing them up with their philosophy, concrete ideas, logic, etc. And the Jews wanted to clarify their texts. You see a softening of the idea that God has a body, that God moves around, that God changes his mind, that God has might have the same kind of emotions as we humans have, like getting pissed off or getting annoyed or repenting of having created everyone and therefore destroying them in Genesis 6. This book helps to work through this all in a rational way, which still has that passion for the Bible. This is man obviously still very much in love with God, still very much in love with the wrestling match that goes on between God and the soul, between God and the mind, as we go through life, as our concrete circumstances change, and therefore our response to God and our understanding and interpretation, our experience of God changes. So I've been criticized for changing my mind over the course of these few years of doing these videos. I make no apologies for it. And I find justification for it in books like this. And it's great to see a guy who's also been, I say also, has been very sincere in wrestling and going where that wrestling match has taken him to. It's not, if we see right through the Bible, this changing tack of, for example, in the Torah, there's no mention of heaven and hell, no mention, very, very little mention. The blessings are for this life, the focus is on this life, and gradually over time, more of an emphasis. Well, what happens? The good were martyred there, in the book of Maccabees, etc. What's going on? What become of them? How did God permit that? Well, okay, we look at eschatology. God's going to make it right. Resurrection. Until the book of Daniel, very much, practically nothing on the resurrection. Only a few proof texts here or there to show that it was an interest, a solid interest in the afterlife. And then once we come to the New Testament, there's this strong eschatological bent and much more emphasis placed on life beyond the tomb. Again, one has to look at what was the context of all of this in Second Temple Judaism. I remember years ago in a coffee shop in Dublin, I entered and got into a conversation with a group of Protestants. And they'd said to me, I was a new convert to Catholicism, and they said to me, oh, we thought you were one of us. You take the Bible so seriously. You take these things so seriously. We thought you were one of us. Maybe being a Scotsman as well. And one person who was in the group, he said, look, I don't believe the Bible. It's full of contradictions. Full of contradictions. Well, Peter Enns would answer that by saying, yes, it is full of contradictions because you're not meant to take it literally. It's okay that there's contradictions because those contradictions record the wrestling matches, the unresolved wrestling matches of the people of God. The midrashic wrestling matches of the people of God. So, like the Jews have their midrash, they have a text, and then they have multiple commentators on the text. And they're okay with the fact that Rabbi this said that, Rabbi Eliezer said that, Rabbi whatever it was said this, Rabbi Jacob or whatever said this. And it's okay. They all said different things. Now, see you at synagogue on Saturday, Christians don't do that very well. We're always looking for this kind of hard mathematical answer. The answer's on page 47. You just tell me if the Trinity's true or not. Blood has been shed. Whole churches have fallen out and gone their separate ways for thousands of years. Well, for over 1,000 years, based on things like the filioque or homoousios, which, look, dogma is important, but at the end of the day, the Bible itself is not a dogmatic tool. It's not a rule book for dogma or for morality per se. It's fluid. And therefore God is showing us this is how you do your walk with God. You wrestle. Different circumstances, you're going to meet God. And along the way, you have to use your own noggin. You have to use the Holy Spirit that's been given to you in line with your own spirit as it evolves and, make the right decision in the moment. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrestled with this during World War II, He was a pacifist, get involved in the war. He was in America, a nice cushy teaching position, and he had to make the decision, am I going to just stay here and bury my head in the sand, or am I going to get involved, go home and be with my people in their suffering? He decided, I've got to be with my people. It cost him his life. And he decided, I can't be a pacifist. Can't just have prayer meetings. This man has to be stopped. And he got involved in a plot to kill Adolf Hitler. But he wrestled with it. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? And, some Christians would just be adamant that it was the wrong thing. What's he meddling in now for? Thou shalt not kill. But at the end of the day, he just said, look, the answers are not black and white in the Bible. The answers to everything that we have to do, they're just not spelled out here. That's why we have 1,001 and many, many more different congregations and different churches, all saying that they're the final word, all saying that they've managed to nail it all down and that they'll provide all the answers that you need for all time and get you to heaven. But that's not what the Bible actually does. The Bible doesn't give these concrete set of rules for all circumstances. It's not casuistry, casuistry or whatever it's called. It is life. Jesus, as Peter Enns shows, he's not teaching, like, okay, today I'm going to give a lecture on the nature of God, Trinity 101. Today I'm giving a lecture on soteriology 102. Today I'm giving a lecture on maniology, just so you don't get that wrong, peeps. Today I'm going to give that elusive, long searched for ecclesiology lecture. Don't miss it, 104. It would be great if he'd have done that in a sense. In a sense, maybe not, because that's not what we're here for. If we're here just to sit in pews, pew warming while the middlemen dish God out to us in their fancy robes and outfits, if that's all we're here for, then yes, why didn't God give us those lectures? It would have been so much easier. If Jesus had intended to set up an institution which is one size fits for all peoples, all nations, all churches, all religions, then yes, one would have anticipated in 101, 102, 103, 104 series of lectures. Instead, what we got was a series of stories, parables, and life together, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer would say. That's all we got. We were invited not to a set of dogmas, but to the way. Come and do life with me. Come and walk in the shadow of the rabbi. Come walk in step with me. And what we see today is very few people walk in step with Jesus. Where are we going? Our leaders, the churches, the monasteries with millions and millions of pounds stashed away in big bank accounts, making money. The Vatican with billions and even trillions, untold amounts of wealth, which they use in different trusts and properties and all the rest of it. Elusive and exclusive properties and trusts. And they still have the audacity to ask for money from people, the Peter's Pence and all this kind of nonsense every year. They still have the audacity to ask the pensioner for money on a Sunday. Still have the audacity to squeeze Rome, squeezing the parishes or the bishops in their palaces, squeezing the parish priests for a certain percentage, whatever it is it 10, is it 20, I don't know, percent. Anyway, I digress somewhat. That's something else I'm looking at these days, really researching the middleman, our need for it, the middleman in different religions, the clergy, the experts in fancy costumes and cloaks. To finish off, Jesus is this great exegete. I haven't quite finished this reimagining God the Jesus way. Jesus, the great exegete, and then some tools on how to navigate our way through the Bible. As I say, the book, very conversational, very easy to read from that dimension, not a lot of footnotes, It flows. You can read it rapidly. I read it over a few days. Most of it, I find myself agreeing wholeheartedly with. The Bible is not a static rule book. It's a changing, flowing thing as the people of God, who see themselves as the people of God at times and at times no, wrestle it, their relationship with God out, figuring out and refiguring out who is this God that they worship. Figuring out and refiguring out in new circumstances what's the right way to act, what's the most important thing about being a follower of this God, and what are we to make of people outside of the fold. I'll leave it there. All the best.